The air in the old Catskill gym hung heavy, thick with the metallic tang of sweat and the ghost of countless forgotten battles. Flickering fluorescent lights on the low ceiling cast long, distorted shadows that danced erratically with the dust motes suspended in the cool, damp air. Marcus Hayes, the veteran, a picture of arrogant confidence, moved with practiced, almost elegant grace inside the ring, a calculated jab, a dismissive feint. His eyes, full of years of experience and a touch of condescension, barely acknowledged the young man across from him. Mike Tyson, barely out of his teens, stood utterly still, a perfectly coiled spring, his distinctive shaved head gleaming under the sparse industrial lights. His deep, intense gaze, though lowered, absorbed every calculated move Hayes made, every subtle shift of weight. 12 seconds. That's all it took. A collective, almost imperceptible gasp from the few skeptical onlookers, coaches, local journalists, rival boxers, leaning on the worn ropes, their faces a mixture of expectation and thinly veiled disdain. Hayes, preparing another elegant combination, underestimated the silent, contained storm brewing within the young fighter. What was truly about to shatter in that intimate, raw space? The air in the old Catskill gym, a relic from a grittier era, hung heavy, thick with the metallic tang of sweat and the ghost of countless forgotten battles. Flickering fluorescent lights on the low ceiling cast long, distorted shadows that danced erratically with the dust motes suspended in the cool, damp air, creating a dense, almost surreal atmosphere. The rhythmic thud of a heavy bag echoed from a far corner, punctuated by the sharp squeak of sneakers on the canvas and the low murmur of coach's instructions, a symphony of raw effort. A subtle metallic note, reminiscent of exertion and dried blood, permeated the space, mingling with the acrid scent of old leather and liniment. It was late afternoon, perhaps early evening, the cool, damp climate outside lending a foreboding quality to the interior, as if a storm was brewing, not in the sky, but within these very walls. Around the perimeter, other boxers and gym personnel moved with an almost ritualistic slowness, performing their training routines, their deliberate motions a stark contrast to the concentrated stillness that would soon dominate the central arena. The boxing ring itself occupied the scene's heart, elevated and almost altar-like, its worn ropes and stained canvas bearing silent witness to decades of ambition and shattered dreams. Here, champions weren't just made, they were forged in a crucible of intimate, raw confrontation. A small, expected crowd, coaches with their arms crossed, local journalists clutching notebooks, a few rival boxers with thinly veiled disdain, crowded close, leaning on the ropes. This spatial composition created a palpable sense of claustrophobia, amplifying the tension and intimacy of the looming confrontation. Marcus Hayes, the veteran, moved with practiced, almost elegant grace inside the ring, a calculated jab, a dismissive feint, his branded training gear a subtle flex of his established status. His eyes, full of years of experience and a touch of condescension, barely acknowledged the young man across from him. Mike Tyson, barely out of his teens, stood utterly still, a perfectly coiled spring, his distinctive shaved head gleaming under the sparse industrial lights. His deep, intense gaze, though lowered, absorbed every calculated move Hayes made, every subtle shift of weight. This stripped-down, glamour-free environment intensified the brewing conflict, forcing both men to confront the truth of their skill, their insecurities laid bare. What was truly about to shatter in that intimate, raw space, and what would it reveal about what true strength truly meant? Mike Tyson stood, a statue carved from raw power, his compact frame humming with contained energy, a stark contrast to the arena's muted chaos. His distinctive shaved head, a stark silhouette against the flickering fluorescent lights, barely shifted, an anchor of stillness in the swirling dust. Every muscle was a taut wire, yet his movements were almost imperceptibly precise, a slight lean, a subtle shift of weight, revealing a profound economy of motion that spoke volumes. He wasn't just observing Hayes, he was absorbing him, every calculated feint, every dismissive feint, filtering it through an internal calculus honed by a tough childhood and the unwavering belief of his mentor. This wasn't mere aggression, but an unshakable dignity, a silent promise of an intellect few recognized beneath the surface. A perfectly coiled spring held an exquisite internal tension. Beyond the stoic exterior, Mike Tyson carried the weight of every dismissive voice that had ever branded him. Just a kid, a savage, a street brawler, echoes that fueled a silent, burning fire within.
This wasn't anger, but a profound desire to prove the depth of his talent and mind, to validate his mentor's unwavering faith in him. His intense, often lowered gaze hinted at a complex internal landscape, a battleground of past insecurities and present ironclad resolve. He fought not for his opponent's humiliation, but for the validation of a profound philosophy that true strength lay in absolute control, strategic anticipation, and keen intelligence, a psychological chess match far beyond mere brute force.
This quiet pursuit of earned respect, born from a visceral need to overcome ingrained prejudice, made his presence deeply human, a testament to resilience forged in the crucible of adversity and self-mastery. Across the worn canvas, Marcus Hayes, known as the Veteran, moved with a fluid grace born of countless bouts and years of ring experience, his branded training gear a subtle flex of his established status. His eyes, though sharp with seasoned wisdom, also held a subtle condescension, dismissing Tyson as merely another fleeting boy wonder without genuine technique or discipline. Yet beneath the veneer of effortless arrogance and confident jabs, a deeper, more vulnerable current churned, an underlying fear of obsolescence. His staunch belief that boxing was an art of refined subtlety and enduring strategy, not raw, untamed power, served as a brittle shield against this fear, masking a fragile ego unable to conceive a true threat outside his established mental framework. This visible pride, a carefully constructed defense against his hidden insecurities, made him a compelling, if flawed figure, ripe for a painful yet ultimately transformative revelation. Marcus Hayes, radiating an almost visible aura of nonchalant superiority, continued his graceful dance around the ring, a series of calculated jabs and feints designed to probe, to intimidate, to dismiss. His eyes, though assessing, held a flicker of impatience, a subtle disdain for the young man who remained so unnervingly still. He interpreted Mike Tyson's quiet focus as a lack of aggressive initiative, a rookie's hesitation rather than a predator's coiled patience. Each fluid movement from Hayes amplified the unspoken challenge, a veteran's declaration that the ring was his domain, his rules. The subtle shift in the air, however, was not lost on the few onlookers. A collective, almost imperceptible tension began to gather, hinting that Hayes's confidence, though outwardly solid, might be built on a dangerous miscalculation of the silent storm brewing. Tyson's gaze, though lowered, was a laser, not missing a single nuance of Hayes's footwork or the subtle twitch of his shoulder before a feint. The echoes of "just a kid, a savage," pulsed in his memory, fueling a cold, focused determination. This wasn't about rage. It was about precision, about proving the profound intellect behind the raw power, a testament to his mentor's unwavering belief. He saw through Hayes's elegant facade, perceiving the underlying fear of obsolescence, the rigid adherence to predictable patterns. Every dismissive move from Hayes was absorbed, analyzed, and filed away, a piece of a complex puzzle Tyson was meticulously assembling in his mind, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal the truth. Emboldened by Tyson's continued stillness, Hayes picked up his pace, a flurry of combinations intended to overwhelm, to expose, to ultimately end this sparring session on his terms. He pressed forward, closing the distance, believing he had found a tactical weakness in Tyson's defensive posture, an opening to exploit. The audience, now leaning in closer, held its breath, sensing the veteran was about to deliver a decisive blow, a lesson to the quiet challenger. Hayes's confidence swelled, masking the subtle shift in his weight, a brief, almost imperceptible commitment to a wide left hook that to his seasoned eye seemed perfectly timed and unassailable. He was setting up the finish, completely unaware he was merely setting the stage for his own unraveling. The air in the gym thickened, charged with unspoken expectation, as Hayes committed to his powerful, sweeping punch, leaving a fraction of his guard exposed. The rhythmic thud of the distant heavy bag seemed to cease, replaced by the sudden, almost deafening silence of anticipation. Tyson, who had absorbed every prior movement, every breath, every feint, now saw the perfect, almost mathematical opening. His head remained still, his eyes locked onto Hayes's exposed flank, not with anger, but with the cold, calculating precision of a surgeon. The crowd leaned in, their collective breath hitched, as Tyson's compact frame suddenly tensed, a barely visible tremor running through his muscles, signaling the imminent unleashing of a perfectly contained, devastating force.
Hayes's wide left hook, intended as a decisive statement, sliced through the humid air of the gym, a blur of leather and ingrained confidence. The veteran's body rotated, putting his full weight behind the blow, expecting the young man to flinch or fall under its sheer force. Yet Leon Vance, a study in contained power, remained eerily still, his head barely swaying, his torso twisting almost imperceptibly, absorbing the impact with an unnerving, almost dismissive ease that bordered on defiance. The punch meant to shatter Vance's composure and physical resolve, merely glanced, a testament to the young fighter's profound mastery of defense and spatial awareness, a silent declaration of his imperviousness. Hayes's eyes, usually so assured, flickered with a momentary jolt of genuine surprise, a tiny, almost imperceptible crack in his carefully constructed facade of nonchalant superiority. The collective breath of the onlookers, previously held in tense anticipation of a definitive knockout, released in a hushed, confused murmur, sensing a palpable shift in the expected narrative.
Slightly unnerved, Marcus Hayes immediately regrouped, his veteran instincts kicking in. But a subtle tremor of frustration now laced his movements. He launched a quicker combination, a blur of jabs and a right cross, aiming to overwhelm Vance with speed where brute force had failed. Vance continued his defensive mastery, a fluid dance of slips, weaves, and perfectly timed blocks, each movement economical, precise, and utterly devoid of panic. He wasn't just defending, he was collecting data. Every subtle shift in Hayes's weight, every tell in his shoulder, being cataloged in his mind. The gym fell into a strategic calm, a momentary lull where only the rapid thwack of leather on leather broke the silence, allowing the audience to process the unfolding, unexpected defiance, building a quiet anticipation for Vance's inevitable response. Then, a subtle change rippled through Vance's stance. It wasn't an attack, not yet, but a deliberate, almost academic shift of weight, a slight pivot of his lead foot, and an almost imperceptible feint with his shoulder. This micro-movement was designed not to land a blow, but to disrupt Hayes's rhythm, to plant a seed of doubt, to subtly unbalance the veteran for a fraction of a second. Hayes, still clinging to his arrogance, misread it as a rookie's desperate, uncoordinated move, a sign of fatigue rather than calculated intent. He scoffed internally, his confidence briefly restored, unaware that this seemingly innocuous adjustment was the first thread of a meticulously woven trap. The air thickened with this veiled danger, a silent promise of what to come, as the fight subtly shifted from Hayes's perceived dominance to Vance's quiet, strategic control. Exploiting the fractional opening created by his earlier feint, Vance's movements became more pronounced, yet still retained their devastating economy. He didn't unleash a wild flurry. Instead, a quick, precise body shot snapped out, not with the full demolishing force he was capable of, but with enough impact to make Hayes grunt and flinch, a visible jolt of pain crossing the veteran's face. It was a calculated probe, a revelation of a weakness, a clear signal that the tables had turned. The audience collectively gasped, now fully invested, their previous skepticism dissolving into awe as they witnessed the silent master's strategic brilliance unfold. Hayes, momentarily stunned and scrambling to recover his balance and composure, found Vance already shifting, his gaze locked, his body coiled, setting up the next, more decisive blow in a sequence that felt both inevitable and terrifyingly swift. Tyson's coiled spring released with primal yet perfectly calculated force, precisely as Hayes's wide left hook merely glanced off, leaving the veteran momentarily off balance. Without a flicker of hesitation, Tyson's lead foot pivoted almost imperceptibly, his entire weight shifting fluidly from back to front in a blur of controlled motion, a testament to years of drilled technique. A short, sharp jab, not for raw power but for tactical distraction, snapped Hayes's head back, momentarily obscuring his vision and disrupting his recovery. Then, with devastating economy, Tyson unleashed a brutal, precise body shot, a right hook that dug deep into Hayes's exposed ribs, below the elbow. The sound was a sickening thud, felt more than heard across the hushed gym. Hayes's breath hitched, a guttural grunt escaping his lips as his body convulsed, his elegant posture crumbling under the sudden, visceral assault. The crowd gasped collectively, their skepticism dissolving into dawning horror. Tyson's eyes remained locked, an unblinking, focused intensity that promised a relentless continuation.
Hayes, reeling from the unexpected body blow, stumbled backward, his carefully constructed composure shattering like fragile glass. His eyes, wide with searing pain and genuine alarm, tracked Tyson with desperate urgency, a stark contrast to his earlier condescension. But Tyson was already in motion, a relentless, controlled storm, a blur of focused aggression. His follow-up was instantaneous. A lightning-fast left uppercut tore through Hayes's flailing guard, connecting with jarring impact precisely beneath his chin. The sheer force snapped Hayes's head upward, his body momentarily suspended in an arc of pure vulnerability, his feet leaving the canvas. This wasn't a wild, flailing attack. It was a surgical dissection, each punch a precise instrument of deconstruction. Tyson's hips rotated, his core engaged, every ounce of his compact power channeled into these perfectly timed blows. Hayes tried to raise his gloves, a desperate, futile attempt, but his movements were sluggish, his mind struggling to process the overwhelming speed and brutal efficiency of the young master. The air vibrated with the raw, undeniable truth of Tyson's power. The final blow was not just physical, it was a profound statement, a philosophical exclamation mark on the 12-second masterclass that redefined raw power. As Hayes's head snapped back from the devastating uppercut, his vision blurred, his senses overwhelmed, Tyson stepped in, closing the distance with predatory grace. His right hand, a compact, devastating hammer, coiled, then unleashed an overhand right that connected flush precisely on the veteran's exposed jawline.
The impact was a concussive crack that echoed through the stunned Jim, silencing all other sounds, the very air seeming to vibrate from the force. Hayes's eyes rolled back, his body going completely limp, collapsing to the canvas in a slow-motion fall that seemed to stretch for an eternity. He hit the worn floor with a heavy thump, a crumpled heap of shattered arrogance and bruised ego, his bravado utterly extinguished. Tyson, however, stood absolutely still, his chest barely rising, his intense gaze unwavering, no hint of triumph or rage, only the quiet, serene satisfaction of a task perfectly executed. The 12 seconds were up, and the silent master had irrevocably spoken. The canvas felt cold against Marcus Hayes's cheek, the heavy thump of his fall still reverberating through his skull, a dull counterpoint to the ringing silence that now enveloped the gym. He lay there, a crumpled heap of shattered pride, not just physically defeated, but utterly dismantled in the mere 12 seconds that had just transpired. His body ached, a searing protest from his ribs and jaw, but the deeper, more visceral pain came from the brutal clarity of his own misjudgment. He had seen a kid, a street brawler, dismissed him with arrogance and condescension, blind to the surgical intellect behind the raw power. His carefully constructed world, built on years of predictable patterns and a rigid definition of veteran wisdom, had just been irrevocably shattered, revealing his own stagnation and the fear masked by his superiority. The truth, delivered with devastating precision, was a punch far more profound than the one that had knocked him out. It was the chilling truth about himself. A shadow fell over him, blocking out the flickering fluorescent lights. Hayes, struggling for breath, squinted up, expecting a triumphant sneer or a dismissive turn. Instead, Mike Tyson stood over him, his chest barely rising, his intense gaze unwavering, devoid of rage or gloating. A calloused hand, strong and steady, extended downward. Hayes, dazed and disoriented, stared at it, processing the unexpected gesture. Then Tyson's voice, a low, resonant rumble, cut through the lingering fog in Hayes's mind, direct and simple. "You lean too much on the left when you set your hook, Marcus," Tyson stated, his words a precise, clinical observation. "And your eyes," he added, his gaze piercing. "They always tell the story before your hands do, betraying your intent." It wasn't a taunt, but a hard, quiet lesson, delivered with the serene authority of a master. Hayes blinked, a wave of profound bewilderment washing over him. This was not the savage he had so carelessly underestimated, but a silent mentor, offering a brutally honest yet utterly necessary truth. The offered hand was not pity, but an invitation to confront his own weaknesses, to learn from a source he had deemed beneath him. Slowly, painfully, Hayes reached out, his fingers finding Tyson's firm grip. As Tyson pulled him to his feet, a wave of humility, both inevitable and surprising, began to displace the crushing weight of his pride. The gym, once a stage for his arrogance, now felt like a stark classroom. His worldview shifted, transforming Tyson from a mere opponent to a new paradigm, a testament to a deeper strength built on self-control and wisdom, not just physical prowess. In that moment, Marcus Hayes, the veteran, began to see his own long journey anew.
The cold canvas had been a brutal shock, but the truth in Leon Vance's words was a far more profound blow to Marcus Hayes. Standing now, supported by the young fighter's steady hand, the veteran felt a dizzying disorientation that transcended the physical impact. Vance's calm, precise critique, "You lean too much on the left when you set your hook, Marcus. And your eyes, they always tell the story before your hands do, betraying your intent." It wasn't just a defeat, it was a surgical dismantling of his entire fighting philosophy, a public exposure of his carefully guarded weaknesses. The arrogant facade, so meticulously built over years of ring prowess, crumbled, revealing the raw, festering wound of his fear of obsolescence. The familiar gym, once his undisputed domain, now felt like a stark, unforgiving courtroom, judging not just his technique, but his very identity. Hayes swallowed hard, the metallic taste of defeat bitter on his tongue, but a strange clarity began to pierce through the haze of humiliation. He replayed the 12 seconds in his mind, not with anger, but with a horrifying realization. Vance was right. Every subtle tell, every predictable pattern Vance had articulated had been there, ignored by Hayes in his self-assured blindness. This wasn't merely a loss of a sparring match. It was a confrontation with the trauma of his own stagnation, a stark mirror reflecting his inability to adapt. His ingrained pride, a brittle shield against his deepest insecurities, began to yield under the weight of this visceral truth. He had clung to the past, to classical methods, dismissing innovation, and in doing so had become precisely what he feared, obsolete. The veteran identity he cherished was now in question, demanding a complete reevaluation. In that raw, exposed moment, Marcus Hayes began to shed the heavy cloak of his arrogance.
The disdain for street brawlers evaporated, replaced by a quiet, almost reverent awe for Leon Vance's strategic depth and self-control. Vance was no longer a threat to his legacy, but a living embodiment of the sport's evolution, a new paradigm of strength that transcended mere brute force or even refined technique. Hayes looked at his own scarred hands, no longer seeing instruments of dominance, but tools that had grown rigid with unexamined habit. He realized that true mastery lay not in clinging to what was, but in the humility to learn from what is, even from a kid who had just shattered his world in 12 seconds. A seed of a new purpose took root, a quiet understanding that perhaps his greatest contribution wouldn't be in fighting, but in teaching, in fostering the very innovation he had once so fiercely resisted. Years bled into decades, and the legend of Leon Vance's 12-second masterclass grew, but so too did the quiet respect for Marcus Hayes. No longer the veteran, defined by a single humbling defeat, Hayes transformed into a revered boxing analyst and mentor. His voice, once laced with arrogance, now carried the weight of earned wisdom, his commentary dissecting bouts with a profound understanding of both physical technique and psychological warfare. He often recounted the Vance encounter, not with shame, but as his pivotal awakening, a gift of brutal truth that shattered his ego and opened his mind. He taught young fighters that true strength wasn't just in the punch, but in the humility to learn, the discipline to adapt, and the grace to admit when you'd been outclassed. Hayes found a deeper purpose, his legacy forged not in victories, but in the lessons learned from his most profound loss, a testament to enduring growth. The arena of life, much like that boxing ring, constantly challenges our perceptions of strength and wisdom. When was the last time your own pride, like Marcus Hayes's, blinded you to a crucial truth, preventing you from seeing the silent mastery in an unexpected source? Do you react like Tyson, disciplined and focused, channeling power with unwavering self-control? Or do you let ego dictate your moves, making you vulnerable to what you refuse to understand? Consider the quiet lessons learned, the humility gained, and the profound transformation that can emerge from unexpected defeats. Are you willing to shed your preconceived notions, embrace growth, and learn from every encounter, even those that shatter your world in mere seconds? And you, what are you doing with the strength you have, the strength of your mind, your spirit, your capacity for change?